Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver. Is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. So, welcome to February, the second week. We're getting it in, trying to navigate all things love and relationships this month. And I think that for most of us, we are in this season of being able to try to figure out what it is that we want in relationships. So, one of the most common things that people come and talk to me about in relationship season is boundaries and expectations in relationships. So, the question, of course, is what is too much to expect? Am I asking for too many things? Am I asking for too little things? Where is the balance? And so, I want to take a little bit of time today and talk about relationship expectations. One, yes, it is important for you to have expectations in relationships. And I think sometimes we are afraid that when we have expectations of people, they won't meet our expectations. And so we end up undervaluing ourselves and also not asking for what we need and what we deserve. And oftentimes that ends up resulting in resentment because now I'm upset with you for not showing up in the way that I really would like for you to. But also, it ends up causing us to get in positions where we feel like we're being used because I am giving to a person what I want to receive back, hoping that this person will use my wonderful modeling examples and they will govern themselves accordingly. And that is absolutely not the case. So, let's talk about what realistic expectations look like. One, creating expectations is truly about what are your negotiables and non negotiables. Sometimes you're going to be in positions where you are not in a place to be dating. And so it's going to be important for you as you're setting expectations to be realistic about what you can offer people as well as what you're able to receive from people. Some of us are wounded, we're hurt, we might have just gotten out of relationships where we're not treated very well, so we may have issues with trust. We may be in positions in our lives where we're just really busy. We're at that time where a lot is going on for us in a season. That could be work, that could be grieving, that could be caregiving, any number of things that could be going on. And so it's important for you to be able to understand as you're creating your expectations, what is realistic for me in terms of being able to give to a partner as well, not just what I am able to accept or what I desire from a partner. As you're thinking about what you're able to give and what you would like to receive, when we talk about realistic expectations, what we're saying is what is absolutely feasible that a person can absolutely manage, and two, what is something that is a non-negotiable for you, right? And so we're looking at a couple of different things as we're setting those expectations. What's feasible for another person? Some of us feel as if because we could have constant engagement, interaction with people, that we oftentimes feel incomplete and not whole when we're not with a person, when we're not in a relationship, when this person isn't calling and texting us, then that they're not paying us any attention and they don't care about us. But really, what it is you have a very high need for affiliation, connection, affirmation, and belongingness. And so you may be putting undue stress on a potential partner who is not oriented that way. Okay, so let me be clear about that. That there are people out there who also have that same high level of wanting to spend that time that in getting that constant reassurance and affirmation and spending that quality time that may be their love language with you. But it is not realistic for you to expect someone who isn't oriented in that way to then force themselves to be available to you whenever you're available. And how I often see this playing out is when people are maybe retired versus someone that's still actively working. This retired person has all this time. They can travel, they can go to lunch whenever, they can pick up, they can be more spontaneous because they don't necessarily have other obligations. Here, this person is that's working. It's like, I can't just take off like that. And I also get some joy and some benefit from working. I want to be able to nurture these other things over here. I don't necessarily want to be in a position where I'm spending all my available and free time with you. So that's what can cause the problem. So as you're thinking about your potential partnerships, you do need to think about what it is that you I think are going to have as a best fit, a best match for you, instead of trying to pull someone over and force someone to be something they're not. Find someone who is at that level. For those of you who are busy people and you got a lot going on, maybe you still have young children, maybe you're trying to get a business off of the ground, maybe you're involved in a lot of different activities. As you're thinking about partners, think about partners who also have things going on as well. And so it doesn't feel like I am always busy and this other person is just kind of hanging around waiting for me to be free. We're both busy, and then it might be easier for us to navigate and schedule our busyness together, being able to stagger those times so that we can spend that time with each other. But that's why it's very important to communicate what your availability is when someone is interested in you, and you may be perhaps interested in them as well, as you're beginning to figure out whether or not you two would be a good fit. What's your level of busy? What's your availability? How frequently do you like to talk to people? Are you a person? Some people can go a couple of days without talking to you. That doesn't mean they don't love you, doesn't mean that they don't care about you. But for them, they're able to be secure in, hey, I'll talk to you in a couple of days. I know we're both busy. I've got stuff going on. You've got stuff going on. We'll be intentional and connect with each other, but it doesn't have to be every day. For some people, they find that to be very off-putting and that it feels very rejecting to them. And they also have some suspiciousness about, well, what are you doing that you can't just at least make some time for me in a day to speak with me? So again, instead of dragging someone or trying to drag them kicking and screaming over, make sure you're communicating that that's your level of need at the offset. And so people can be able to make an informed decision about whether or not that's something that they can handle. Now, it is very important for us when we tell somebody that we're able to handle something that they present to us, that we're true and we're honest when we say that. And that goes to the second part of realistic expectations, is honest and truthful, truth in advertisement, as we say, right? So I need to be very clear with people instead of trying to pretend I'm something, because for some of us, we're selling an experience. I like you, and so I will tell you whatever it is you want to hear in order for you to get connected to me. And then bit by bit, the truth will seep out, because you'll either see it in my behavior or eventually I'll tell you, or maybe you'll find it out, and then I just won't deny it anymore, right? So we want to make sure that we're being open and honest with people and communicating exactly what it is that we're able to give and what we're able to handle. And sometimes, because we are longing for relationship and connection to people, we will say that we can handle things when we really can't, or we're hoping that this person will change. You all will hear me say frequently, you don't date potential, you date people. So you cannot think about who this person could be. You have to look at who they are currently. Past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. When we're talking about navigating expectations as well, we want to think about whether or not we want to have boundaries with people around how they engage in their friendships and in their relationships with other family members. And I know some of you are saying, well, they don't have any business telling you. You already had friends before you met them. You already had family before you met them. This is one of the areas that gets people into conflict and trouble, because they have not communicated these things. If you know that it is not going to be something that is going to sit well in your spirit when you have someone who is funding their family, whenever anybody calls, they are the first bank of truth and trust. And so they are giving people whatever it is they're asking for, taking them for truth, when we know good and well that all your family members are not necessarily getting operations. They are getting over there to the nail salon and they're buying them expensive shoes and they're getting some rims for their car, right? And so if you're not a person who is going to feel comfortable with your partner, being in positions where they're constantly giving money to their family and often complaining about it, then you need to go ahead and recognize that that's a boundary for you, and that's one of your non-negotiables, right? And you don't need to fix this person. It isn't your job and responsibility to come in and be the regulator and enforcer in this person's life in order for them to get a boundary. You just need to be clear about that type of people that you want to date and have these boundaries. There are also financial boundaries. Some of us are spenders and some of us are savers. And so oftentimes a spender will get with a saver and they'll think, oh, okay, well, you can help me better manage money, or I'll get with you and you'll be more stable. And what ends up happening is the saver now feels like they've got to be the life preserver all the time to be able to manage this person's spending, when it's very important for you to date people with whom you're equally yoked, right? And so if the person is growing and learning, then let them grow and learn. Let them do that. They don't need to have you being over their shoulder trying to encourage them and again drag them along to this place where they're not. If that's something they're working on, you let them go ahead and get that managed before you get into a relationship with them. What is the biggest thing that causes conflict in relationships? Finances, communication. Those are the top two for certain. right? And our different value systems ends up coming in third, which can affect parenting and some other the ways we handle situations, judgment, all of that good stuff, right? So we want to make sure that when we're thinking about our expectations and our boundaries, we're putting that in place. What are my, again, non-negotiable? What is negotiables? What are these boundaries I want to have? If you don't want to date people with children, don't keep moving the finish line because you see somebody that's like, ugh, I like all these other aspects of them, but they have these children. If there is a reason that you have decided not to date people with children, then stand in that reason and recognize that there are going to be great people that come along. That doesn't mean they're not great people. That doesn't mean that they don't deserve love. But if you recognize, and some of you have a good reason why you don't want to date people with children. Some of you are not children people, and you will not be loving kind to these folks. So don't get involved with people when you know you're not going to respect their children, or you have negative perspectives about children, or you're in a different phase of your life where you want to be up and moving and you don't want to have to manage making sure that somebody has child care or prioritizing their child. Don't do that to them or their child. Be honest again. That goes back to this piece with yourself about you are not in a position to be able to be involved in that blended family in the way that all of you deserve. So let's just not, right? And also in terms of making those boundaries and accommodations with people, thinking about, am I changing these expectations that I'm going to end up reverting back to later? And then I'm going to be upset with this person and they're going to remind me, hey, I told you this up front. Because sometimes we're ending up and we're dating people that we know are in relationships that allows them not to be available to us. They might be married, they might be separated, they're still married. They might have a girlfriend, they're still in a relationship, they have a committed partner. They may want multiple partners, and whereas you want a committed relationship. So again, navigating those boundaries, if those are things you do not want, you know how that turns out. It hasn't worked out well for you. It's not going to allow you to develop trust. It's not going to allow you to feel connected. You know that that is going to cause you to feel insecure, jealous. It's going to cause you to have negative self-talk about yourself, and it's not going to allow you to ultimately have the type of relationship that you want. Then you don't need to be trying to force yourself to fit into that box, into that window of opportunity for someone that's temporary when you want something that's long term. Also, I talk a lot to people about boundaries with regard to friendships, male and female friendships. Some people have very, very loose boundaries with their friends. They hug their friends, they kiss their friends, they spend a night with their friends, they have their friends over, they've seen their friends unclothed. Some of them have had sexual intimacy with those friends. If you know that's something that you're not comfortable with, and you're going to constantly be concerned about whether or not this is a true friendship or if you all are still romantically involved, there's something about this dynamic that makes you feel like there's an intimate connection that is beyond one of a friendship, then if that's not something that you can handle and manage, you don't need to go back and forth with this person about whether or not this is their friend. You just need to recognize that that's not a boundary that's for you. That's not something that you want to deal with in your relationship, and that it is okay for that person to go ahead and do what they do and you move in a different direction. But sometimes, again, we're trying to force those things to make it happen for us. We're trying to make these allowances and expectations and exceptions that don't actually fit with what we said when we started out this journey were going to be our boundaries. So, again, you have to be true to your boundaries. If there are friends that you have who are constantly crossing your boundaries, friends or family members, you tell them not to go into your room, they're constantly going in your room. You tell them not to borrow your stuff, they're constantly taking your stuff. You tell them you're not going to be funding their endeavors, they're constantly coming to you with money requests, and you're constantly feeling obligated to do it. That's a boundary issue as well. And some of us, we have a hard time with family members and friends because we feel like these are, again, relationships of obligation. So I'm responsible for this person because they're my blood or they're my friend. I've known them since I was 2 years old. And then other times we're just so concerned that people are going to leave us and not deal with us if we don't give them everything that they want. And we still feel obligated because now I just don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be abandoned. Neither of those are good reasons for you to continue to engage in relationships that violate your boundaries and make you feel used or abused. But it is important for us to be able to recognize that sometimes we will lose a relationship in the way that it was. That isn't necessarily a bad thing because people will keep you in the spaces that benefit them. So people will give you a hard time about wanting to change because they don't want you to change, because then that means that you're not going to be giving them something that they've been receiving this whole time. That doesn't mean you're wrong. That doesn't mean that's bad. But it does mean that it's a boundary and this might be a little uncomfortable for you. And sometimes when we're in this season of being able to establish these relationships and these boundaries and these expectations of what we want in relationships, we got to be a little bit uncomfortable. It is important for you to be able to recognize that who you are and your worth is not a reflection of your relationships. And so when you're thinking about relationships, it should not be because you think that one will make you something, because it's not. You are a whole being unto yourself. The relationship absolutely can add to and enhance you, particularly if it's a very wonderful partnership. It's an awesome friendship, a supportive kind of relationship, but that does not necessarily mean that without it you could not be, because again, your wholeness is not reflective of whether or not you're in this relationship. I do think it's very important for you to see if you have a pattern of repetition, that you're attracting the same kind of people, you're getting in the same kind of relationships, the same kind of friendships, the same kind of dynamics at work, because that is a boundary that you also need to address. Why am I continuing to have the same type of things happen? And likely the answer is because I keep allowing it to, because we know that people will treat us however we allow them to. So you become, as my good friend Steve Brock would say, an active participant in your own victimization. It is important for you not to think that you can threaten people, right? I know a lot of times we'll do ultimatums and we'll threaten people and we'll tell them, hey, if you don't do this, then I'm going to leave you. You don't need to give people an ultimatum. Your boundaries are your boundaries. They respect them or they don't. If they don't respect them and you recognize this isn't something that's possible for them to respect, you simply leave the relationship. And I know that's not always as easy, particularly if you're married, you're living with the person, you have kids together. But all of the threats are really idle threats, because the reality is most of the time we're threatening, hoping that people will change. They're not going to change because they are who they are. They've been who they've been, and they're going to be who they're going to be. And so in accepting that, we recognize that if we want different things, it will be us creating the change, not waiting for someone else to do it. You can absolutely have loving, wonderful, supportive, kind, nurturing relationships in your life. But you have to set the guidelines about what that's going to look like and be willing to reinforce those boundaries and leave when they're not being met. All right. Be well in this season of love.